Dallas. That was unfortunate.
Just to give you guys a heads up, we're live while we're discussing this and setting everything up, so we can keep the conversation going, talking about our triumphs and our disappointments from this past weekend. Like I said, I was very happy to have like Odell Beckham in a bunch of my lineups. That was one of the exciting things for me. However, I was very disappointed for like a lot of my best ball teams, for example, to have a lot of Chargers and a lot of Colts in my lineups. And my two best ball teams, one of them has the Colts very heavy, and the other one has the Chargers very heavy. Aaron, are you into best ball at all, or were you mainly DFS?
I'm doing okay on best ball right now because I was really heavy on the Bills and especially Josh Allen, and then I did a lot of Packers, hoping that the Bills would get me through the first round, and then hoping for that Green Bay Buffalo Super Bowl. So right now it's looking all right.
Yeah, I did somewhat similar. I knew it'd be a tough week one for me in best ball, mostly because I was so freaking heavy on the Titans when they were dirt cheap. Like, if you remember, beginning of when like the wild card was going down, and then the Mitten won. AJ Brown was a late round pick. Henry was a kind of round 3, round 4 originally. And so I was so heavy on these Titans. I was like, they're going to make the playoffs. And then unfortunately, I looked at them as a team that was probably not going to get a bye. And so I had like a lot of lineups that were dead from having too much Green Bay and Tennessee. So as soon as Tennessee locked up the bye, I was like, that's going to be an absolute killer for me, because I was treating them as a team that would not have a bye. And then, the Chargers were a bit painful for me. I was actually light on the Colts. I mean, I'm a Colts fan, but I just looked at it. I was like, Colts could easily miss the playoffs, and Taylor's a round 1 pick. That's kind of insane. The Cowboys were painful for me. I was heavy on the Cowboys. And them going out round 1 is going to be tough. Even a lot of the lineups that I advanced, like I had a lot of Cowboys Bills lineups that advanced, but I mean, they're not going to do anything.
Yeah, it was disappointing because like I was sitting there and I had the 49ers as my top over, like, or the underdog, right? The team that I had over top of the Cowboys. And I thought that they would be able, regardless of who they play, to challenge whatever team it was, because typically their strengths aren't the strengths on defense of a lot of the teams in the playoffs this year. Like, I think that you could see another upset with the 49ers up against the Packers. Unfortunately, Aaron, sorry to say that, but I mean,
there's a history there, man. I'm ready.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's going to be a lot higher scoring game. We'll actually dive into that. But as soon as the 49ers landed with the Cowboys, I was like, shit, like this is not good, because I had so many shares of the Cowboys, who I think would have done fine up against any other team that they would have played in the Eastern Conference outside of maybe the Packers, because I think they would have struggled up against the Packers in the next round if they would have won, or in the conference championship, I should say. But it's interesting to see where a lot of these pieces ended up landing, and I wish that I would have gone heavier on Josh Allen. I wish that I would have gone a little bit heavier on Patrick Mahomes, and I'm not disappointed with any of the results by any stretch of the imagination, but it's kind of interesting to see where everything kind of like settled out and where I was taking certain players at which times that ended up being successful. So like, Mitten 1, Mitten 2, Mitten 3, like all these things, I had such mixed
shifting
results.
around all over the place too, with
exactly
as the landscape kept changing.
Exactly. So, you guys ready to hop into this DFS show? We got to kick this thing off. Y'all ready?
Oh, yeah.
All right, let's do this. Where are we?
This is Fantasy Intervention. Now here to intervene with your fantasy life, Shane Manila, Jakob Sanderson, and Chase Vernon.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome on into Fantasy Intervention. Yes, DFS is here. And last week, man, we melted minds with the take between Jakob and I. And you know what? I thought that we should add to the already improving DFS picks that we've seen throughout the year. and add one of the smartest people in the DFS industry with Aaron Larson. Man, what's going on? How you doing tonight?
Hey, good evening. I'm doing well.
Dude, I'm excited to kick down this episode, excited to really get started. I messaged Jakob earlier, and I was like, Jakob, dude, like, I'm stoked about this episode. My mind is swimming. I can't keep my mind, like, contained right now. I'm all the way from, like, galaxy brain to conservative. I'm all over the freaking place right now, so I'm excited. Of course, I'm joined by Jakob, and unfortunately, Shane does not able to make it because he does not play DFS, of course. But, Jakob, what you got going on, man? How you doing?
Man, well, I'm excited, but I fear that I'm not going to be able to come anywhere close to matching my Kendrick Bourne call from last week. So I'm not sure if people are tuning in expecting that. I don't know if we'll have that again. Of course, the irony is I mentioned Kendrick Bourne for the 2-game slate, and I played like no lineups for the 2-game slate, so I didn't derive any benefit from that beautiful call. But no, I'm excited. I'm excited to see which running back comes in at like 40% ownership and then is a third down back. That'll be interesting. Excited to see a lot of things. It'll be a fun slate.
Dude, it is a fun slate, man. Like, there's so many different things that are happening with this slate, and I'm going to start this out by saying, like, we could sit here and we could hammer away at Patrick Mahomes, right? We could hammer away at Josh Allen. We could hammer away at Aaron Rodgers, but those have to be the 3 highest ownership plays in the entire slate, right?
You would think so. I mean, those are the stud quarterbacks, and that's what kind of drives the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at it, and across the board, like, I mean, outside of, I think it's Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams, who are astronomically priced compared to the rest of the stacks, all the rest of the stacks are relatively, like, fair when it comes to figuring out which guy, you should pair with the quarterbacks. And I went through it. I've done this study before over the last 3 years for last year's playoffs. So this was the 4th year that I've done it. And it's kind of crazy how little the quarterbacks actually utilize the secondary and the tertiary options in their offenses when the playoffs come around. I believe in the divisional round for last season, we only saw 2 options in the receiving game that were not the alpha wide receiver lead the team in fantasy points when it came to the actual, wide receiver position. When it came to the conference championship round, there was only one player, I think it was Cole Beasley, if I remember correctly, that did it last year. Maybe it was somebody else. But either way, there was only one player to do it in the conference championship. So we have 3 players in this 2 rounds of playoffs that, I mean, like, that actually outproduce the alpha receiver, because these quarterbacks, they go right back to their alphas. They're going to trust the Devontae Adams. They're going to trust the Deebo Samuel. They're going to trust the Cooper Kupps of the world. And that's where I think we're going to start with a lot of our stacks. But prior to getting into it, is there any game that hits y'all as possibly hitting the under overall? We have the Cincinnati Bengals and the Tennessee Titans at 47 apiece. The San Francisco 49ers, Green Bay Packers at 47.5. We have the Rams and the Buccaneers at 48.5 right now, and the Bills and Kansas City Chiefs at 55. Do you think any one of these games could be lower scoring? Because, I mean, I'm looking at it, and I just don't see how any of these games could actually hit the under, outside of maybe the 55-point over-under, which I still don't think would.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's like they're all very reasonable. The 55 is high, but if 2 offenses are going to get there, that's the one, or that's the 2. 2 offenses that can get there. So I'd be hesitant betting the over on it, but I also don't want to bet the under on it.
I think that's going to be the toughest one just because of how those teams play. I mean, they both play fast. They both play pass first. I think that even if you see those offenses stumbling a little bit out of the gate, I think it still gets there. Maybe not over 55, but you're still going to see a lot of points scored. I think that the other ones are more interesting just in sort of the fragility of those games. Like Packers-Niners is one where you could see it going a few different ways. It could go really over the total because there's a lot of explosive, incredible players in that game. But I mean, the Packers play slow as shit.
Yes, they do.
And then the 49ers want to run the ball as much as humanly possible. And I imagine, especially if Jimmy G is dealing with a shoulder sprain, they're going to run it even more if that's possible. So you can easily see a scenario, where the first drive of the game, the 49ers have an 8-minute long touchdown march with a bunch of Elijah Mitchell, and the Packers never really push the pace. So you can see some fragility in that. I think Tennessee and Cincinnati too. I think that the market still is, and we saw it this week. I thought that the ownership on the Bengals, especially with it being the first game of the slate, was just really way too high. And I think that people are applying that recent 2-game rosy sample against the Ravens, which were a pass funnel, and the Chiefs where they got down early and letting that be their expectation when we've seen Zach Taylor donkey it up a whole bunch of times. And it wouldn't be surprised me, if he hands it off to Joe Mixon more than he should. And we know that Tennessee wants to play slow. So those are the two games I think that are really the most fragile, where you can easily see them going over the over due to the playmakers on both sides. But I think you can see it where if the coaches get their way, they're quite content to play it under.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the pace of play, right? You can still have a very high scoring team with a very slow pace of play, for example, a la the Packers. It really depends on how quickly you're able to score and being able to score on command.
Yeah, just efficiency.
It's efficiency rank. So when we actually break down the efficiency of these two games who have slow paces of play, by the way, Packers are 32nd pace of play, 49ers are 30th. We have the Cincinnati Bengals who are 29th in the pace of play. Tennessee Titans are 25th. So these are very, they're a lot slower moving teams, what people realize. But when we look at the explosive play percentage that they have, I mean, Cincinnati ranks second in explosive play percentage in the passing game, or explosive passing plays. When it comes to defensive side, the Bengals are 29th in explosive passing plays allowed, and they're 20th in explosive run plays. Meanwhile, the Titans are 21st in explosive passing plays allowed. Then we have the Packers, who are 9th in explosive passing plays. The 49ers are first. And then the two defenses, neither one are great at stopping explosive plays, whether it's up against the running game or the passing game. So, we talked about, or Jakob mentioned how you could see an 8-minute drive derived from the 49ers running with Elijah Mitchell. But I don't know if that's the case, because I think that Elijah Mitchell could end up breaking a long run up against one of the worst teams when it comes to stopping explosive rushers. And even though it might just be 2 or 3 plays in a game, we could see that breakaway capability coming from either Deebo Samuel or Elijah Mitchell at any point. So,
yeah, I think it certainly could. I think it's just a higher volatility game, right? And
yes.
and it's hard to say, now so early in the week where the ownership's going to end up. But to me, I mean, that's what I've been looking at with teams like the Packers and the Niners and the Bengals all year. It's kind of like the Russell Wilson Seahawks for years, where when they get in those games that everybody expects to be a shootout, you probably want to be underweight because you can see a lot of paths to failure when no one's really on them. That's when you want to be on them because they can speed up the game with explosive play. So if I had to guess right now, I might end up even being overweight on Packers Niners, just because I don't know if that's going to get as much ownership versus I think Titans Bengals. I imagine a lot of people want to play them. I think people are going to be excited to play King Henry back in their lives. I think people, if they're playing the Bengals, 75. AJ Brown is a really easy run back, and he's always going to project well. So I could see that game probably getting to a spot where I'm willing to bet on bad things happening versus if people are under on the Packers and Niners, I'm willing to bet on positive things happening.
Now, is there a situation, because this DFS matchup, the slate is so top heavy when it comes to the players that you want to roster? So we have AJ Brown, he brought up, right? We have Jamar Chase, who's top heavy. We have Devontae Adams. We have Deebo Samuel. We have a bunch of studs that I don't know if we've ever seen this level of electricity when it comes to big plays, when it comes to high, scoring fantasy options. I mean, could you in any way, shape, or form, I'll start with Aaron, could you in any way, shape, or form actually not try to do run backs or not try and do multiple stacks, try and stick with the skinny stacks because you want the highest scoring players and you kind of want to fade the chalk? Because how many people are going to play Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase, and run it back with AJ Brown? I feel like you're going to see, thousands of, if not, tens of thousands of lineups with this in there, even in single entry forms if you play in big enough tournaments.
Yeah, and I think that's what's crazy about it is a slate like this. You kind of mentioned the alpha receivers before, but we have some of the most consistent receivers. You talk about Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, Deebo Samuel. I mean, 3 of the most consistent guys you can have, and you're not going to be able to get all those guys in there. So I think it's going to have to come down to making choices. So as much as, we talk about chalk, those are typically 3 of the chalkiest options, but squeezing them all in isn't going to be hard. So to see where that all falls as far as roster percentages and stuff goes, I think really making the right call on that is going to be pretty key. Even Stephon Diggs, and Tyreek Hill, those are typically your stud guys. So there are, Mike Evans, every single one of these lineups has a pretty clear-cut stack that you could choose. There's going to be, I think, a pretty even distribution among a lot of those, the Allen and Diggs, the Mahomes and Hill, Rodgers and Adams. I don't know if Stafford is going to get a lot, but Kupp by himself is going to get a lot. Kupp I could see being a big run back, right? Brady and then Gronk and or Evans with Kupp on the other side. I mean, there's a lot of options on this slate. Then Tennessee game too, even with you mentioned AJ Brown and then Burrow and his pass catchers on the other side. Like, I don't think it's going to condense in one spot because there are so many options.
Jacob, how do you feel about the condensation of ownership? For the primary games on the slate, is there a game or two that stick out for you where you feel like the ownership is going to be through the roof, or do you think it's going to be spread out across all quarterbacks?
I think we see the most on Chiefs Bills for a couple of reasons. I mean, first of all, it's the highest over under. And the Bills are just a really stackable team because they have so many viable options at lower prices. So, you go Allen and Diggs, but you can also do I've been doing this a lot this year. You do the Allen, no Diggs stack, right? Allen, and then just pick two of Knox or Singletary, whatever. The issue with the Bills, I think this week, is last week their routes were an absolute abomination. Diggs played every snap or every route almost. He was out there most of the time, over 80%. And then Gabe Davis actually was out there a lot too, but they were rotating Beasley and Sanders and McKenzie all over the place. So I think that takes some guys kind of more off the board. I think that I'm probably just going to end up, if I had to guess right now, I probably end up heaviest on Adams and Debo of that elite wide receiver crew, because I think people are going to get drawn into Diggs and Hill on par with those folks, even though they just don't project as well because their roles aren't as good because of the game environment. And then I think Kupp, he's going to be, I think, a better, more fun game environment, more advantageous matchup. And so if all those guys are kind of equal-ish, give me Adams, who I think is in a really fantastic spot and had 18 targets against the 49ers in his last time. If he's not going to be outsized above the field, I don't think he is. I could see him being even lower than those guys. But yeah, as Aaron said, I don't think it's going to be one guy 40%, everybody else 10%, everybody else 5%. So it's going to be tough.
I think Diggs and Hill are going to be, I'm just looking at it again now, they are kind of surprisingly affordable,
Yes, they are.
They're down there. So I think that might drive them to be a little more popular as you try to get multiple studs in there. You scroll down a little bit, that might take away from the Kupp and the Adams a little bit, honestly.
Yeah, I think the way I look at it and why I'm probably going to be under on those guys is think about it like betting spreads on high totals, right? So when you have a game with a 54 total, that's where you're more inclined to just bet the money line because the variance with trying to gauge the spread becomes less efficient, right? And I think about it the same way at the top end with wide receiver. The variance window on those guys is so wide that, yes, as you're building your lineup, it feels a lot easier to get in a guy at 7K than 8K. But when you think about where these guys' ceilings are, at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily matter. If Deebo Samuel puts up 40, if Devontae Adams puts up 40, then you had to have them in your lineup. So you had to find a way to get the other K. So to me, I just think it's going to get too convenient to play Diggs and Hill because of the prices, because of the over-under, that I think that they're going to end up being played, frankly, over their projection versus some of these other guys who just have better roles, project better than them, and can – and Diggs and Hill are too, but all these guys are capable of a 40+ point ceiling. And if one of them hits, then then you had to have them. So it doesn't really matter, how convenient it is to fit into their lineup, and all of them are capable of it.
Yeah, we went through that a couple weeks ago with Jamar Chase. How if you didn't have Jamar Chase, you didn't win any kind of big time money. You could have had Devin Singletary. I think he went off that week too. But if you did not have Jamar Chase, you're pretty much eliminated because he saw 10%, ownership in. Across the slate for almost any tournament that you get into. But I do want to propose a different stack, and we'll go ahead and kick it off with this one. With the Rams over there, with Matthew Stafford, and with Cooper Kupp. And those two combined actually see the second highest amount total for any stack with an alpha receiver of any other player on the slate. You see Stafford down there, 6,200, I believe, which would make him the fifth highest quarterback. So he's not even that expensive, but how expensive Cooper Kupp is, that makes for somewhat of an interesting stack because Stafford has not been good over the past 2 weeks. Even this past game, I think he completed 13 passes on 17 targets.
Yeah, well, he was plenty good. The Cardinals decided not to show up to the field.
Yeah, but he only attempted 13 passes. He ended up finishing with a very good overall fantasy finish. But when you go and you look at his previous games, I mean, he hasn't been good. However, him across the entire year, I mean, he's been crushing it. He's number 1 in completed air yards. He's number 3 in red zone attempts. He's number 3 in adjusted yards per attempt. 6.8 touchdown rate. So what do you guys think about going with this stack? Is this a stack that you might be trying to attack? How are you feeling about this one?
Yeah, I don't mind it just because, I mean, there is a legit chance that he has to keep up with the Buccaneers, right? High scoring game. They're the underdogs in the game. And, there's a real world where it's a shootout, but he outscores Tom Brady. I mean, that's in the realm of possibilities. I don't even mind with how good Odell has been, scoring touchdowns lately, to double that up with Kupp and Odell and kind of super stacking it there. And then you could run it back with either Evans or Gronk pretty easily.
With all these high-scoring games on the slate, I'm going to slide over to you on this one, Jacob. With all the high-scoring games on the slate, though, are you cannibalizing your opportunity by playing multiple options from the same team in the receiving game? Are you cannibalizing your opportunities, or do you think there's enough scoring here to happen on this one?
Yeah, I just think it depends on how you want to be right. But to me, I prefer, and you can do it either way, but I just prefer to play with these small slates. If I'm playing multiple lineups, I'd rather make each concentrated on a particular game and just take my shots that way. I mean, the easiest way to me, when there's only 4 games, right, you don't need the same kind of ceiling that you need out of your stacks or of all pieces of it, right? I mean, if you played a Josh Allen with Devin Singletary, Stephon Diggs, and Dawson Knox, I mean, Diggs sucked, but your stack still got there because everybody else got there, and you're able to land on the right team of players, right? And I think really it's just, I don't want to play, it didn't end up happening because Dak was bad. But I wrote about last week in my column, I was like, I don't want to play pin the tail on the Cowboy where everyone's playing this Cowboys game. And then even if the Cowboys do shoot out, you have to absorb all this ownership. And then you don't even know who's going to score because they throw to 5 different guys. To me, if I'm betting on a team, especially if I'm going to be playing one of the teams that's more popular, I'm just going to play a lot of their guys, because to me, the only way that I'm going to have that FOMO where I went underweight on this team is if the game not just gets to the total, but has 70 points, right? So I'd rather go all out. And you don't have to get everybody the same ceiling because there's just less games, right? If Stafford gets to 30 and Kupp gets to 30 and Odell has his, requisite 4 catches for 30 yards and a touchdown, that's fine. You might be able to win, especially depending on your field size. If you're playing that in the SPY in a 500-person tournament and Stafford's the highest scoring quarterback on the slate, Kupp's the highest scoring wide receiver on the slate, and Odell gets you 10, gets you 15, that could easily end up in the winning lineup. So I'd rather do that just to cover my base. I'd rather bet on the game. And I do really like the Stafford stack for a couple reasons. I mean, one, it's price. He's the 6th highest price quarterback. I don't think he's going to be more than the 4th or 5th highest owned quarterback behind both guys in Buffalo and Kansas City, plausibly behind Brady, plausibly behind Burrow. And then you're also Akers is $4,200 freaking dollars. So if everybody's playing Cam Akers, then I want to play the passing game side of that, especially against a good run D.
But you have Cam Akers at 42, or were you talking about for last week?
Is that
you got a phone ringing? I have Akers at 55.
Oh, sorry, that might have been wrong. I saw that. To be honest, it's Tuesday.
Yeah, I got
so if I had the wrong information, I apologize.
Yeah.
So for me, I mean, I can't I don't want to get caught playing Akers first off, because I mean he's not seeing the targets necessary. Tampa Bay has been somewhat decent up against the running backs. They're playing like a bend but don't break type system right now. And without that receiving game work up against Tampa Bay, I don't want to touch that in a stack. And I'm somebody that's an advocate of playing the running back with the wide receiver stacks. I love, playing that and trying to get leverage on the tournaments. I could see how you would want to play Odell Beckham. However, there are ways you can actually play multiple studs. You can actually have all 3 alphas on the wide receivers while being able to fit in different avenues or different, players into this. I did it with a stack with Burrow. I've done it with a stack with Stafford, and I did it with a stack with Ryan Tannehill. So let's hop over to the Tom Brady side, because Tom Brady's side is a little bit more concentrated, right? You have Mike Evans. You could have Rob Gronkowski, possibly, although I believe that the Rams are a little bit better up against tight ends than most are. So, I mean, is this something as to where you're rolling out Mike Evans and you're playing him solo? Or are you going to try and squeeze in a running back, maybe Leonard Fournette? I mean, running backs can eat up against the Rams if they're involved in the passing game. Or, I mean, could you see yourself sneaking in some Giovanni Bernard again? I mean, last time they played, what do you have? 9 receptions, 51 yards, and a touchdown, I believe, in the receiving game. I don't think he had a carry, but he had like 9 receptions for 51 yards and a touchdown in the receiving game. You can eat up against the Rams because they're terrible at covering pass catching running backs. You guys can go see that over there at fantasyintervention.com/DOCE. It's the perfect tool to use for the playoffs because you'll be able to see when you can use effective running backs in the passing game and get leverage on the tournaments. Once again, that's fantasyintervention.com/DOCE, the dose score. I mean, the Rams are one of the worst. So where do you guys sit with this one? Are you trying to go Leonard Fournette? Are you trying to go Giovanni Bernard? Do you not want to touch the running backs? Do you want to get Gronkowski? Do you want to get Evans? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, the running backs kind of I'm not a big fan of any of them. If I'm going to play one, I kind of like just the contrarian Fournette because I don't think he's going to be popular. I was surprised they held him out again. Like early week building lineups last week, I had a lot of Fournette because I figured he was going to be back in that role, and I didn't think he would be popular because of the first game back. Now I have that kind of like same sense again, but with Gio doing so well and even Keyshawn Vaughn looking okay, yeah, I'm a little afraid of just a 3-headed monster, even though that's not a big Bruce Arians thing. It seems like it might fit what they do this week, or this playoff run. So
yeah, it'll entirely come down to ownership for me on Fournette. I really don't have a great feel for it. I think he does get pretty highly owned. Just looking down the list, I mean, we got Henry at the top, who's also coming off injury, right? And then we have Aaron Jones, whose role is pretty terrible. Mixon, I think is fine, but I think people would rather play Bengals passing this week. Singletary I expect to be quite popular. Mitchell should be quite popular. But, below Fournette, there's just not as many options. I think people want to play Fournette. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets between 20 and 30%. I think for me, like if we get Fournette around 30%, then I'm out. Then I'd rather bet on him failing. But if you're telling me Fournette's going to be 10%, I will jam him, because the ceiling is that he's the highest running. The ceiling is not just that he's the highest scoring running back on the slate, but the ceiling is that we look back at the usage and we say he should have been projected as the highest scoring running back on the slate. So it's entirely up to ownership. The other guy in that game I'm going to be way overweight on is Mike Evans, just based on kind of where he fits. He's priced directly above Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs. And I just think how many people, are going to go in and click the button on Mike Evans. I think if people are going to play Hill and Diggs because it helps in the stack, and if they want to spend above Hill and Diggs, I think they end up with Chase, with Debo, with Adams, with Kupp. I think Evans comes in as one of those guys who just gets squeezed out in the mix.
Yep, lost in the shuffle.
I'm super happy to play Evans in that scenario. They've been using him all over the place. Like he lines up in the slot, he lines up out wide. Tom Brady, I thought he was going to cut Tyler Johnson on the football field on like the second drive of the game.
Bad.
So, especially in a game that's going to be competitive, I would expect. If the Rams get up in this game and Brady has to throw back and pass, he's throwing to Evans and Gronk. Like he's not going to mess around throwing to Tyler Johnson in the fourth quarter of a playoff game.
Yeah, I agree. And the strengths of Mike Evans lie in the weaknesses. If he gets matched up one-on-one with David Long on the outside, it's all day long. And, Jalen Ramsey, we could see him shadowed to an extent. But, yeah, I'm not a fan of that one. So I could definitely see with going with Evans. And for that reason that you actually mentioned, where you have Leonard Fournette, where you have Gronkowski, where you have other options, we also have Keyshawn Vaughn that look good. I honestly want to fade the Tom Brady, stack. Like I don't think that Tom Brady is a good option. I think that he sees a little bit of chalk. He's not going to be too high. I think he's going to see more than what we see from Joe Burrow possibly. I think he's going to see more than what we see from Matthew Stafford. I think he's going to be more than what we see from Tannehill.
I don't think he's more than Burrow at all. I mean, he wasn't last week, right? I mean, he was coming in like a third of Joe Burrow's ownership last week. I think he's going to be well under Joe Burrow personally.
No, but the difference between that and Joe Burrow was, we saw Tom Brady play against a poor team, continue to pass just like he's done all season. And a lot of people thought they were going to lean more on the running game. He never did. So I think that seeing what Tom Brady could end up looking like this year versus last year in the playoffs, I think might end up spiking it slightly for those who actually, follow the history of, what people do in the playoffs, because I think that the people that play playoff DFS are a little bit more inept to what happened in previous years compared to what happened in the season. because things do change so significantly. So although I don't think that Tom Brady's going to come in high, like I said, I mean, we could be talking about 1% difference. I do see him coming in slightly higher than what we're going to see from Joe Burrow by a hair. Either way, more than Tannehill, more than Stafford for sure. So yeah, I'm going to be fading Tom Brady in my DFS matchups. Now, onto a option that I don't think that people are thinking as much about because Derrick Henry is coming back, right? We have this matchup. We were just talking about Joe Burrow and possibly seeing a decent amount of ownership. I think that should also end up helping to fade Tannehill, because if you're going to be playing this game, you're most likely going to be rolling out the quarterback that's passing 55 times a game or 40 times a game or 35 times a game, because Tannehill doesn't do that, right? However, Tannehill, he has these games where he throws for 3 touchdowns, right? He throws for 4 touchdowns. And this offense could be moving, but this offense has a tendency to stall out from time to time when they get inside the 10, especially without Derrick Henry. Now, Derrick Henry, he just started taking hits. I think today was the first day that he saw any kind of contact whatsoever, right? And I might even be wrong about that. I think I heard a small press conference about it, and I couldn't really hear what the coach was saying. But if we end up fading into Henry, right, and he ends up not seeing the red zone carries because maybe they don't want to put him in heavy contact situations. Maybe they want to give it to Deontay Foreman. Maybe Henry only sees 60% of the carries, which could still be relevant. Don't get me wrong. But is this a situation where we could see Tannehill passing inside the 10-yard line and racking up 3 or 4 touchdowns in this game and being a contrarian play? Because if you play Tannehill, it is very easy for you to get a Devontae Adams, Deebo Samuel, and Cooper Kupp in your lineups if you're willing to play like an Elijah Mitchell. It is very, very easy. And if you don't want to do those 3, we could talk about, A.J. Brown, who's only, 62, I think. So, I mean, we could be a smash stack with Tannehill and A.J. Brown, and I don't think anybody's even really thinking about it that hard.
Yeah, I love that. So you talk about just the Tennessee offense is better when Henry's in it. That includes Tannehill. Like, they'll move the ball better. The numbers say what they are about play action, if it really matters or not, if you run the ball. But Tennessee is going to run more play action with Derrick Henry, and is going to be more of a threat. I looked this up earlier today because I was exploring the same thing. So this goes back to 2020 as well. But Tannehill averages a lot more fantasy points per game when Henry's in the lineup. That's even down inside the 5-yard line, that read option play that Tannehill can ride it, pull it, and just walk into the end zone. I mean, yeah, I think Tannehill is very valuable. yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love Tannehill just because I think he's going to go way overlooked, and I think his ceiling is there.
Yeah, I'm super into Tannehill. He's my favorite quarterback play of the week. I was ready to talk him up, but you already got there first. Gonna pull up this from Rich Rebar today. Ryan Tannehill only had 10.9% of his dropbacks this season with all 3 of Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, and Julio Jones, which is the reason why everybody was so excited about Ryan Tannehill coming into the season, was he had all these weapons, and then he just didn't have all these weapons. Anyway, he averaged 9.4 yards per attempt in those 10.9% of dropbacks. So when he had all of those guys that we were all excited about him having, he was just as efficient as he was last year and the year before. In the 25% of his dropbacks without any of the 3, all the way down to 5.2 yards per attempt. In the 30% with Derrick Henry, but without AJ and Julio, 5.5 yards per attempt. And then with AJ and Julio, but no Henry, 8.2 yards per attempt. So even I think people are going to be excited about playing Henry back. But frankly, even just having AJ and Julio Jones back is a huge thing for Tannehill. And the best thing about Henry is, that's where the ownership is going to be. He's only at 7,500. He's super affordable for all of the red-blooded, steak-eating males that have just been dying, to not be able to play Derrick Henry. They're going to be so excited to jam him in there.
How many championships did he win in the past? People love him because he's won in the past for them so much.
Right. And frankly, I'm the opposite. I feel like probably 50% of the DFS winnings in my life have been spent playing Ryan Tannehill and AJ Brown stacks when Derrick Henry's the chalk. That's my one move that I always go back to. That's my old reliable for the last 2 years. No, I think it's a great play, and especially because everyone who's playing, you flip the construction, and everybody's playing Henry, right? Or Mixon, frankly. But anyone who's playing Henry, they're not going to be able to spend as much on wide receiver as you can, right? So you play Tannehill, you play AJ Brown, you get off Henry, you spend down at running back. You can build lineups with two of those. If you want to play Diggs and Hill together, but you're not stacking Bills Chiefs, you're worried about the ownership, you can play Diggs and Hill and AJ Brown and you can do really whatever you want to do. So I'm big into that. And Tannehill's priced down so much that he doesn't really have to actually outscore Mahomes and Josh Allen, right? It just has to be that the lineup, if AJ Brown and Ryan Tannehill can get you, say, 50, and Mahomes and Hill get you 55 to 60, you can find ways to make up that point because maybe you get access to extra ceiling at other slots. So I think that he's priced down enough and makes a lot of sense.
So, I mean, my question to your point, Jacob, right, would be like, all right, so if you end up playing AJ Brown and Tannehill, right, and Tannehill ends up finishing, let's just say, X amount of points less than what Josh Allen finishes, and X amount of points less than what Patrick Mahomes finishes. If you play Diggs and Hill, right, you're pretty much going to still be carrying somewhat of the chalk, which makes it very difficult for you to get up past a certain point, which maybe, if you faded Hill or Diggs at that point, because, you're going to have Brown in there. I'm sure that people that are going to be rostering Hill with Diggs as a run back could also roster AJ Brown to an extent, pending the pricing, of course. I mean, what amount of points would you have to hope that Ryan Tannehill gets to when it comes to the differential points from Patrick Mahomes and Allen? Because I don't think that it has to do with the return on investment from the price of the investment from Ryan Tannehill as much as it has to do with your differential in points from the top scoring quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be close enough, but specifically, it's hard to measure because you have to be close enough to where you can make up the gap in whatever you have extra money to spend it on, right? So, say if Allen, Diggs, Hill, combines for whatever n plus 5, and then you have to be able to find that with, say, Debo over whoever's left in that construction. I think what it really lends itself to is if you play Tannehill and AJ Brown, I think just play like Singletary, because he'll be popular, but that doesn't really matter because you're playing like a 2% owned quarterback. And then you hope that Singletary takes enough touchdowns away from Josh Allen that he's not running in touchdowns and racking up 40 points. I would say the same for the Chiefs, but I have no earthly idea who to play at running back for the Chiefs. I mean, if Clyde comes back, are they going to force his ass back into our lives again? I hope not, but maybe. Was Darrell Williams fully demoted, or was he struggling with a toe injury? I mean, I know if I was coaching the Chiefs, I would just say, hey, all of our running backs suck, and Jerick McKinnon had 142 yards. Let's just let him do it again. But I mean, I have no idea. What do you make of these Chiefs running backs?
They're so hard to. I mean, you kind of nailed it right there. CEH is still going to be at least somewhat banged up. There was a toe injury, and then Jerick McKinnon out of nowhere. I don't even did I was gonna say Frank or Derek or did he get on the field?
Yeah, he did. He played one snap only in the first half. He played more in the second half when the game was out of hand.
Yeah,
but in the first half he played one snap, so I wouldn't worry about Derek Francor / Al Gore.
Yeah, no, there might be an opportunity there, but I really don't want to call a shot on a Chiefs running back right now.
No, it's very risky. It's
Jet McKinnon, 4,800, could be a bell cow again.
Okay, so you already know I love Jerick McKinnon. I was touting him throughout the entire offseason. He was one of my favorite best ball picks. He's the last pick of the draft, and he completely let me down. So that didn't happen. I'm still nervous playing him, in the fantasy playoffs moving forward. If he gives me one more week, I feel a little more confident in playing him. But then again, we're talking about, the Super Bowl at this point, or, the conference championship, which maybe they're healthier by that point, and it takes away from him again.
I'll play Jet if this is maybe counterintuitive, but I will play Jet if CEH does play. I will not play him if he doesn't play, because if he doesn't play, I think everyone's going to play Jet, and his role still is pretty fragile. And it wouldn't surprise me if they're just going to do the hot hand thing, and then Darrell Williams ends up getting half the snaps. But everyone's going to want to spend down to the 4,800. And then I'll just play more, Kelsey and Hill, I guess, in that scenario. Whereas if Clyde plays, I'm super willing to bet against Clyde Edwards-Helaire. If Clyde plays and then Jet's 3% owned because people are not sure what to do, then I'll totally play Jerick McKinnon in some lineups and bet that either he handles half the snaps and ends up getting to 15 anyway, or just bet that Clyde just doesn't get off the bench because he's bad.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pivot back to the game that we were talking about a second ago before we get too much sidetracked and getting into the Chiefs and the Bills. And I'm going to read off a stat line for you guys, all right? So we had week 19, 7 receptions, 76 yards. Week 18, not as great, only 3 for 20. However, week 17, 9 for 66. Week 16, 8 for 125. Week 15, 8 for 115. Week 14, 13 for 151. Can I interest you guys in some Anthony Firkser this week? This is what the Cincinnati Bengals have allowed to tight ends over the past 5-6 weeks or so. It's been absolutely insane what the Cincinnati Bengals have allowed to tight ends. Meanwhile, Anthony Firkser has also achieved, 11 and some odd points and 15 and some odd points, and he's sitting there at 3,100. 3,100. If you compare a tight end who, hypothetically, let's just say that he gives you 4 receptions for 40 yards and a touchdown, you're talking about 14 fantasy points?
He's not giving you a touchdown. That's the problem because he doesn't play in the right personnel sets. If you're playing the punt tight end, you're playing for the goal line touchdown, and the goal line touchdown will go to Swain or Pruitt because when they go into run sets, they use Swain and Pruitt. Firkser doesn't see the field, and the Titans have 3 plays that they run inside the 5. Literally, there's only 3. They either hand the ball to Derrick Henry, they do the zone read Tannehill keeper, or they do the fake handoffs at Derrick Henry and then throw it to a tight end that's not Firkser.
They did up until the past 2 weeks where he has 2 touchdowns, I believe, inside the red zone.
So I'm just looking here real quick because I've seen the same thing. I was a big Firk daddy all offseason, best ball everywhere, and it's been frustrating because he has not been on the field for 50% of the snaps more than one time this season. And I'm so looking back at week 17, week 18, Jeff Swaim is 71%, 90%, 60%. I don't know. I like it because I like the touchdown upside with either of them, but it's kind of like a coin flip in my eyes.
If you could combine their roles, then I would love to play it. It's that's just my issue is with Firk. Like he's going to run more routes than Swain because he plays in their pass sets, right? So if they actually play 11 personnel and they're in a passing set, Firkser's the one running the route. Swain plays more snaps because he's out there to run block. The problem is when they get inside the 5, most of the time they throw it to their tight end. It's because they're setting up as though they're going to do a run play. And so when Firk's there, then they're not. That's just my issue with it. I think it's just a harder sell based on the personnel groupings. Like I'd rather just play Julio for double stacking Tannehill personally. And bring back with Uzama, honestly.
So Uzama's also another guy that I like for this week. However, Anthony Firkser has seen 3 red zone targets over the past 2 weeks, and 2 of those have come inside the 10-yard line. So he actually is lining up in these sets where he is the receiving option as the tight end. And I feel like, I'm not saying that they have been keeping it as a secret, like on purpose, but I feel like they just knew that he was like underutilized at this point. And they're like, hey, last year he did really well for us. We should probably give him a chance, a little bit more opportunity than what he's seen, in recent weeks. And so we've seen his snap count somewhat go up since the bye week. Up against Jacksonville, he played a lot more often, but he's seen increased snap share in the final weeks since the bye, I believe, if I remember correctly. So either way, Firkser at 3,100. If you can get that touchdown from him with let's just say 3 receptions for 30 yards, 4 receptions for 40, which is what he's almost given you over the past 2 weeks, is something that it could pay off. But Uzama is a different option that you could use to leverage, lineups if he ends up vulturing a couple receiving touchdowns, especially inside the 10, because you know that people are going to be playing Joe Mixon, whether I agree with it or not. He's still going to end up in a bunch of lineups, even though I don't think he should. T. Higgins is going to end up in a bunch of lineups. You have Jamar Chase, who I really like this week, but he's going to end up in a bunch of lineups. I mean, I feel like Uzama's the odd man out, but he's given you decent weeks, I believe, over the past 2, or at least last week he gave you a big one. We'll start out with Aaron on this one. How you feeling like with the Uzama?
I'd say I feel confident, but I like it as a dart throw. So especially like if you play the smaller slates, if you play the Saturday only slate, it's George Kittle and then a bunch of dart throw tight ends. And why not pair the guy who's playing with Burrow in that.
Are we not calling George Kittle a dart throw tight end at this point?
Yeah, that's not. Yeah, you're not wrong, actually. That's you can't have any confidence playing him because God, I don't even really want to how bad has he been the last 4 weeks, 5 weeks?
Abysmal. He's caught like 6 passes in a month.
2.8, 6, 4.5, 4.1.
Dart throw. Like he either gives you he gives you 30 points or he gives you like sub 5.
George Kittle's yardage totals for the record, the last 4 weeks are 21, 29, 10, and 18. That is absolutely depressing, which, I mean, don't get me wrong. We all know what George Kittle's ceiling is. We saw it 6 weeks ago. On the 4-game slate at 5,300, I think he's a jam. But on the 2-game slate, if everyone's going to play him, I mean,
and everybody is going to play him,
so just the failure exists.
Yeah. How just still looking back at that box score or the game lines or whatever, that 5 catches for 10 yards. How does that happen?
From George Kittle, that's crazy. Yeah, I mean, George Kittle is definitely somebody that I want to take a shot on, but obviously, yeah, he is a dart throw like Jakob brought up. So, I mean
we've seen Uzomah have ceiling games this year. I mean, he has that upside, absolutely.
And Tennessee has allowed him to an extent.
He runs a lot of routes. They just don't throw it to him because they have way better players than him. But he is out there. Like it's not like the Ferkser situation where you're kind of worried: is he going to be on the field? Is he not going to be on the field? Uzomah's on the field. He's honestly like Dawson Knox. He just hasn't had as great of touchdown luck. Where he's a guy who's running every route, but he's just only drawing like 10, 12% of the targets. It's just that Dawson Knox has ran ridiculously hot in the touchdown column. But Uzomah is like kind of arbitrage poor man's Dawson Knox in that respect.
I like it. Let me bring up Joe Burrow real quick while we're here. Is Joe Burrow going to end up being chalked this week, which we briefly talked about earlier? Is he somebody that y'all are going to try and roll out in hopes that he could end up performing? Or is he somebody that you're more so going to fade because you think he's a waste of money and he has a decent ceiling, but the ceiling isn't the same ceiling as like, maybe a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes? Meanwhile, they could end up having the same ownership as we get closer to the week.
I think he does have the same ceiling because, I mean, we have seen it week 16, week 17. But that being said, I'm going to be fading Burrow this week. I just think he is just not – I'm afraid of what we kind of talked about way earlier in the show with the Zach Taylor. Okay, I'm going to go back to the Joe Mixon's going to run this ball 25 times, and we're going to try to – that's just a ball control game with Tennessee. That's my fear there.
Yeah, I'll be under on Burrow because he plays at 3:30 on Saturday. Right. Like it's just same thing I felt about him last week was in these 4-game, 6-game slates. I mean, your largest edge is that you get sequential late swap after every single game, right? You get to react to the information that you get, and then you get to set lineups. And I understand that, yes, maybe Cincinnati, Tennessee, it's 80 points and that's the game you need. But what you got to weigh is, okay, is the game efficiently owned? Because if everyone's thinking that way, if everyone's thinking I have to fade these early games and stack the late games because I want information, then sure, I'd be happy to take it and play that early game and sacrifice the information. But that's certainly not what we saw last week. I mean, Joe Burrow came in like 15 to 20% owned in most of my contests, and T. Higgins and Jamar Chase were right along with him. I think he's going to come in around there again because I think people love Joe Burrow, and I understand why they love Joe Burrow. But it's just a hard fade for me at that point. I think he's very fragile in terms of being affected by Joe Mixon and Zach Taylor's willingness to be a donkey. I think he's fragile because Tennessee's goal for the entire game is going to be to have Joe Burrow have the ball for as little time as possible by establishing Derrick Henry, and they very well might accomplish that goal. So I think that Joe Burrow will come in over-owned based on his price anyway, and then doubly so when you just factor in the time of that game. And I would just way rather be underweight on the first game of the week and be able to adjust later.
Jakob, my first line for this piece that I'm working on for Player Profiler. My favorite part about Joe Burrow is he creates an interactive situation being the first game on the slate. If he crushes, you can adjust your lineup, and if he ends up shit in the bed, you can adjust your lineup. So I had the same train of thought, but on a completely different spectrum. As if like, hey, if you play Joe Burrow with the skinny stack, you can adjust the rest of your lineup. But I completely agree with what you're talking about. As hey, he also handicaps you if he doesn't do well, and you will not have the ability to late swap your quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, right, just in terms of this information piece, I think it's really key where with the early game specifically, obviously, your best case, you just play the best lineup. But now take Josh Allen, for example, right? So we kind of saw this last week. Josh Allen was one of the earlier games. Now, he came in way under-owned, so I was willing to play Josh Allen anyways because I just thought he was inefficiently owned. But let's say you didn't have Josh Allen in any of your lineups, right? You see him go for 40. Now you have an opportunity to make adjustments. You go, okay, Josh Allen crushed. So now I kind of know what I'm up against, right? And I think that helps you make decisions because now you look at it and say, okay, if I need to compete with 40 at the quarterback position, like I had done a couple really disgraceful, self-hating lineups with Ben Roethlisberger where I just thought like, what if he passes enough to get the 300-yard bonus and a couple touchdowns and then squeezes me out 20, 25, we'll build around. As soon as I saw Josh Allen can go for 40, I was like, all right, well, Ben is getting out of the player pool, right? Because that's not going to be the upside. And so I'm looking at, okay, I'm going to probably just play Kyler and Mahomes for all the rest of my lineups now because I want to try and compete with a 40-point ceiling. And you get the opportunity to do that with ownership too, right? Like I came in and I played a lot more Gio Bernard because I was like, he has a ceiling and he's going to be 1% owned. So in any of my non-Josh Allen lineups, I want to get access to that. To me, it's just easier. You have more options. You can adjust to being burnt by a chalky piece that goes off a lot easier than you can adjust when you play a piece that fails. Like if you play a piece that fails, you can make adjustments and try and scrape yourself to the min cash line. But like if once you play that piece that goes out, like you're just not going to get first. So you're screwed. Whereas, I think with the other way around, you can still try and orient yourself a little better.
Yeah, and if you played Mahomes, to your point, you would have been able to still have a chance at the significant line. And you also could have played multiple other players who could have gotten
not if you stacked him with Darrell Williams.
Oh, God. Oh, God. Aaron, do you feel differently or are you feeling the same way? Like you already said that you're going to be fading Burrow for the most part. But, I mean, with him being the early game, does that affect your take at all?
It does. Yeah, I'm on the side of I want as much information as possible. And it's not as big of as it was this past weekend, 4 games compared to the 6 and the only, 2-2 instead of the, what did we have? 2-3-1 was kind of a weird lineup. So I don't mind it as much, but with the other options that are available, I would rather wait and see, at least for that first game of the slate. Or is it? Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm more inclined to play Tannehill because I don't think he's going to be efficiently owned, right?
Yes,
like I think Tannehill is going to be like 1% owned, and so I'll play, maybe 2%, whatever. He's not going to be a lot owned.
Oh, and if you have Tannehill and he flames out, you still have a lot of money to play with.
Right, exactly, and a lot. So I just think it's different. Like if you tell me right now that Burrow's going to be like, I think on this slate, I think with Allen and Mahomes in the game that they're in, and with, I think, Stafford and Brady being comparably good plays, Rodgers we know has a ceiling, I think efficient ownership on Burrow, and I mean, I'm not running projections right now, but I think it would probably be in the neighborhood of like 12 to 15%, I think would be like an efficient ownership. But I think that we see him at like 20. So if you were to tell me that he's efficiently owned, I still want to be underweight because of the time. If he's over-owned, I want to be underweight regardless. But if you're going to tell me he's going to be 8% owned, then I don't care. Then I'll play him. But I don't think he's going to be 8% owned.
All right. Well, with that being said, let's go ahead and build a lineup. I think we've covered, enough guys to an extent. I wanted to talk a little bit about some players like Allen Lazard and stuff, and maybe we could walk through some of those players as we build these lineups because they are going to be, relatively heavy in terms of, where we're looking with, certain price points. So, Aaron, I think Jakob and I are on the same team when it comes to Ryan Tannehill. Would you be all right running out the Ryan Tannehill stack in this one?
I love it. I was tinkering a lot today, and I usually had Tannehill end up being in my quarterback slot.
All right, let's go ahead and throw out Tannehill. Of course, we're going to run it with A.J. Brown as well. And I know Jakob liked Ferkser, so we should probably play Ferkser as well, the tight end slot. He's on mute, so he
oh, geez. Yeah, whenever my favorite part of this Ferkser theory is that we just spent 20 minutes talking about how great it is that we have all this money to play with from Ryan Tannehill. And then we're like, actually, we have to make sure to play a 3K tight end who plays 30% of the snaps because that's what we're going to do with all of our extra savings.
Wait. But when you sit here and you're able to play Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, you end up running, because I've been messing around with this all day. you end up running like Elijah Mitchell in here. I think Singletary fits in. Like you can actually make this lineup right here work if you play Ferkser, and you can still bring in a stud over here at the tight end, at the flex position, I believe, or at least somebody
Well,
that's decent.
not a stud, but
No, I think it's somebody decent.
Can we leave tight end off for a second here?
We can leave it all off.
We can leave it all off.
Of course. I just wanted to bring that up. I just wanted to say there's a reason, there's a method behind my madness, and I think that playing Devontae Adams and Cooper Kupp will make up for Ferkser as long as Ferkser gets a touchdown. He has to get a touchdown though. If he doesn't, you're screwed.
If we have three people here, we want to do this like around the horn, and each of us gets to put a name in the lineup.
No, I think we should come to at least a 2/3 agreement, if not all three. Right. And without having to like fold our belief, like actually, hey, I really want to play this guy, and all three of us have to want to play it, because I think that if all three of us believe in a certain player for a rhyme and reason, it creates, essentially, backed up beliefs or research, educated decisions from all three of us. And I know that Jacob and I both come from different spectrums. So,
well, you're going to hate the player I suggest, which is why I asked. But I want to play Joe Mixon in this lineup.
Oh God, no.
I want to play Mixon because the Titans have to be pushed into passing, right? That the Titans aren't going to just come out and start passing. So I think that the world in which which Tannehill gets there is probably a world in which the Bengals are up in this game early on, and then the Titans end up passing a little bit. And then also, I just think if this is a back and forth shootout type game, then I don't think Tannehill's going to outscore Burrow, right? Like if this game is just back and forth the whole way, I think, and it's through the air. So to me, I think it's a little thin if we're playing Higgins or Chase. I mean, you can certainly get there, but I think then you're inviting in the opportunity where Burrow just torches Tannehill. Whereas I think Mixon, if Mixon gets 2 rushing touchdowns in this game, then that's pretty easily explainable why Tannehill outscored Burrow.
But go ahead.
Oh, I say I like Tannehill, but maybe this is from a totally different perspective. I like him not because I think he's going to throw 404, but I could see him doing 200, 250 yards and a rushing touchdown.
Yes,
you get there on efficiency, and maybe they win 21-17 or something, like that, where he accounts for all 3 of the touchdowns.
Yeah, and having his name on all 3 of those touchdowns is kind of what I was implying in the first argument, saying, hey, he's had games with 3 touchdowns, he's had games with 4 touchdowns this season, and essentially we're banking on Derrick Henry still getting a decent amount of efficiency, possibly Devonta Foreman getting a decent amount of efficiency, but essentially getting stopped at the goal line, where Ryan Tannehill isn't throwing long bombs necessarily. He's not, beating them with his arm. He's beating them with his ability to assess football situations inside the 10-yard line and scoring multiple touchdowns inside that range. Now, I still think that it can be a higher scoring game while Joe Burrow throws for a bunch of yardage. And Joe Mixon does take a touchdown, possibly 2, but I just don't see a world where Joe Mixon will actually put up the yardage possible. Tennessee is one of the best teams up against running backs. They do not allow breakaway runs. Meanwhile, their secondary is porous as hell.
See, these are the things that I just I couldn't care less. Like when you're telling me that a team is great at stopping the run, I'm saying great, that running back will be less owned. Like that matters so little to me.
Well, I am curious where Mixon's going to come out with the ownership, because
I think not high. That's why I want to play him so much, because he was like 50% owned last week and he sucked. And then now you've got Henry above him in the same game as him. People aren't going to play Henry and Mixon in the same lineup, I don't think, very often. That just feels messy. And then you got Mitchell below him, who had a good game last week. And then you've got Singletary, who crushed. You got Fournette. Like I think Mixon comes in not that highly owned, which is why I like Mixon so much.
Have we mentioned how crazy it is that Aaron Jones is the second highest priced running back on this slate?
Yeah, I thought he'd be the second highest Green Bay Packers running back on this slate, but
I've even brought him up later. But AJ Dillon is kind of looking good down there.
Yeah, I love AJ Dillon.
How about Singletary? Can we all agree on Singletary? Because I do think that game's gonna have so many points that if we're playing Tannehill, I think it helps us to take points away from Allen at the running back position. And he projects really well. Like Singletary just projects awesome.
I'm aboard with Singletary.
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Mixon just isn't good at football. He got lucky with a couple games, but I mean, honestly, he's just not.
Since when does that matter in DFS? We care if people are good at football now.
All right, so
I guess that's how I played so much Darrell Williams last week.
I do want to play a player from this game, and with how terrible Tennessee has been up against deep threats, especially guys with speed, they allow a ton of volume to slot receivers. So if somebody told me they wanted to go they want to go Tyler Boyd this, I wouldn't even hate that. I wouldn't like it, but I wouldn't hate it because I think he's going to have low ownership. There's possibility he gets a touchdown in, very similar to what we talked about with Uzma. And he literally has the same exact stat line possibility as Uzma with probably less ownership.
That he plays the position that everyone we want to play plays.
Yes, that is a problem.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. So, but I think that Jamar Chase is going to be the guy here. I know he's going to have high ownership. I think the way that we can design these lineups could actually push some of these other players out of it that would be chalk. And I think we're going to end up having to play one of these guys at a lower price. So I think Jamar Chase makes sense. And then one of the dart throws will actually make up for the chalk that we could see from the Ryan Tannehill, A.J. Brown, Jamar Chase.
I'm fine with Chase, and I don't think he'll be that highly owned, even off the big game, because Higgins is 1,400 below him. So I think that'll keep them pretty similar.
Aaron, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I don't mind Chase. I mean, he's got the touchdown upside all the time. I mean, if you're going to go with one guy, that's what you want to go for.
And
where do you think, Aaron, the ownership comes in with Chase and Higgins? Because last week they were closer in price. So last week they were 1,100 apart, and Higgins came in more owned, which I think made sense just based on the projection and the price. Higgins, of course, we're unsure if he played in the game. Some people said that he was spotted on the field, but I can't confirm. And then now he's 1,400 below Chase, who is the clear number one target. Do you think that people go back to Higgins, or do you think that we're going to see some remnants of week 10, week 11, week 12?
I don't think he's going to be popular at all. I just with
I don't want to play him.
just because he burned so many people, and we've talked about all the studs that are available on this slate and how we can find ways to jam them in there. So I think he's another guy that could get lost in that middle range shuffle of these receivers.
Yeah, I mean, it was just so explainable why he didn't play well last week, because the best corner on the Raiders is Casey Hayward, who is still quite a force when he's not playing someone who can just run right by him because he's old as hell. And so they put him on Higgins, and he did a good job. And they got Chase basically one-on-one against, I don't even know how to pronounce the name, but Faison, something like that. Faison, yeah. And he was just toasting him for most of the game. I'm not worried about Higgins. I think Higgins is a great play, especially if he's not owned. But I'm fine with Chase, too. I mean, Chase's ceiling is like 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. So.
What's been something that has been repeated over and over again this year is like you play the players that failed last week who had success in weeks prior because his ownership will be down. And it's like I've heard that so many times over the past like 10 weeks, more so than I've heard any other season. People are just trying to hammer away at the low ownership options because nobody else has owned them, that I feel like it's bringing up the ownership because the price is dropping. And we've seen it with Higgins to an extent. Higgins had a stretch of really bad games, and then he ended up succeeding for like 3 weeks. So, but we saw Higgins' ownership, it didn't drop for like the first 5 weeks of the season, 6 weeks of the season, until it continued for a long period of time. I feel like it's that case with a lot of different players where if they have one bad week, it really doesn't affect ownership as much unless another player is starting to take snaps from them, particularly at the running back position, which is, obvious. But, I feel like if players have 1 or 2 bad games, it really doesn't affect it as much as what we've seen in the past, where, like you'll see a player almost fall at the face of the earth when it comes to, ownership projections if they give you a 0 reception performance. Anyways, not to dwell on that too much. But I feel like we should load up on the tight ends here because the running backs are relatively cheap, and I'm not going to be the one to go with the Derrick Henry, Tannehill, and A.J. Brown stack. So that's going to leave us with relatively cheap options at the position. Would you guys rather go there, or would you guys see what we can get at running back and then pivot over?
Matter to me. Yeah, I kind of like maybe checking out running back and see what we get after that for tight end.
Yeah, if we like a running back here, we already have Singletary. I would. Are you on tight end here? Can you go to running back?
Yeah.
I would say. I mean, I'm fine with whatever. I mean, I probably want Fournette the most, but I'm fine with Mitchell too. Although I kind of want to play Kittle, so that makes me a little bit more off of Mitchell. But Fournette's probably the guy I like the most, based on a lot of what Aaron was saying earlier. But I'm fine with honestly any of these guys except for Henry because we're playing Tannehill, and then I'm certainly not playing Aaron Jones.
Do you think AJ Dillon's going to be popular because of how far down he is in price?
So
I love him
AJ
for that
Dillon.
price, but
I wrote about him at his
Tough
price
matchup for him.
at 51. But if he sees, a couple goal line carries, if he sees any kind of work in the receiving game, which San Francisco is actually great at stopping pass catch running backs. But I mean, regardless, like AJ Dillon is somebody who I think could make lineups work if we find certain things. So that's why I said let's go with like the wide receiver first, tight end, and see what lines up for us at the running back position.
Yeah.
I would also, I wouldn't hate rolling out Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Oh God, no, we're not doing that.
I just said I wouldn't.
I would just straight up way rather play McKinnon.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, okay, McKinnon, that's fine too for me. I'm okay with that. I'm also okay. I don't love it, but I'm okay with Cam Akers to an extent. But let's explore what we have for the wide receiver position.
The Dillon one's interesting. I would love to, if it was any other matchup, I'd probably be more into it. It's not as much that I'm afraid of the matchup in San Francisco, like I was saying with Mixon. Like I'm not saying that AJ Dillon can't succeed against San Francisco. More so, it's that I don't think that Matt LaFleur is a total donkey like Mike McCarthy, and I think that he actually does scheme his offense in a way that makes sense. And I think that he's going to look at San Francisco where their strengths are, and it's in that front four on the inside runs. And unlike Mike McCarthy, who just kept launching Ezekiel Elliott into the line for no reason whatsoever, I just think he's going to look at this matchup and say, okay, I think it's a little bit more of an Aaron Jones game where we're going to play more. I mean, they really do sort out their runs based on their personnel, right? I mean, we see more of the off tackle, more of the receiving. That's Aaron Jones territory. More of the inside the tackles, it's AJ Dillon territory. And I think that Matt LaFleur is going to game plan correctly, and I think that's going to end up with more of an Aaron Jones game. We also saw the last time that they played San Francisco, although it was all the way back in week 3. We got a lot of Aaron Jones in that game, very little AJ Dillon in that game, but obviously AJ Dillon's role has grown a lot since then.
So they actually like to use Dillon a lot on the outside. His size and his speed actually matches up wonderfully up against smaller corners. So I haven't done the research in a few weeks, but at a few weeks ago, AJ Dillon not only had more yards per reception and saw more targets on the outside and had higher success rates of breakaway runs on the outside and breakaway receptions.
He might have that on rates, but he doesn't play that many on volume. Like in terms of their snaps where they're deployed, whether or not you think it's right, that's just how they've been deployed.
Yeah, and then Aaron Jones actually has way higher success rates going over the middle up against middle linebackers. But once again, that's rates. You're right. It was rates that I did the study on, not volume.
Like I'm fine with that argument. It's just I just think in terms of how they're actually used, that's how I anticipate seeing it using. But Aaron, you're the Packers guy. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Dillon has been surprisingly good in the passing game. Like this guy that came out of college with, I don't even know how many catches he's got, but some of the catches he's made, they're not just like dink and dunks, screens. Like they're running him with routes and
on the outside.
And I don't know. Maybe this is just it totally is narrative based, but cold weather game. Just I've got this feeling that they are going to just try to kind of get out to an early lead and go from there.
He's heavier too. Let me just bring that up because we talked about it a few weeks ago. He's heavier, and when it's really cold out, the fields could be icy. And AJ Dillon weighs more into the turf than Aaron Jones does. So Aaron Jones is essentially on ice skates. Meanwhile, AJ Dillon gets weighed into the turf, so he gets way better traction. No, sorry.
This is snow tires, right?
This was a bit from a different show.
Yeah.
I just had to make sure I brought that up so that Jacob hated me for saying
God.
it. All right, so can we pivot over to wide receiver real quick?
Yeah, seems like that's going to kind of decide what we do, I think, from there.
Yeah. I want to play Devontae. Like, can we lock Devontae? Like, I really want to lock Devontae.
Yeah, let's do it.
We can lock in Devontae for sure. I was going to say him or Cooper Kupp is a lock for me. Either one, I'm fine with playing. And that leaves us with it's looking like Anthony Ferkser at the tight end position.
Kettle.
No, so, I mean, what are we looking at tight end at this point? You know what? Let's do a placeholder at defense. Just to throw in the Chiefs for the hell of it. At the tight end position, we are now looking at, let's see, about 4,500 for the rest of our lineups.
If we are playing Ferkser.
If we play Kittle, essentially, we're screwed. If we play, it's either, I feel like it's going to be Higbee, Uzomah,
I don't mind
Well,
Higbee.
first,
Why don't we play Higbee? Because we're playing Adams over Cup, so I think that makes us want to play Higbee, right?
Oh, that makes sense. I like that take. I think Higbee's a smart play. That leaves us with 9,700 over the last two positions, which still is okay. It's not great. It's okay. If we decide to go with a higher end option, we'll have to take a flyer like an Alan Lazard at the wide receiver position. Let's see, who else did I have as my flyer?
There is a Hall of Fame wide receiver at 4,700 that is correlated with our stack. I'm just saying.
Stack, yeah. Julio
Tyler
Jones,
Johnson.
4,700.
I'll take it. I'm down with that. But that would leave us with 5K at the running back position. That's not enough. We could always pivot down.
You could play Dylan though. You get 51. You can spend down from the Chiefs a little bit, can't you?
Yep, absolutely. We can actually spend down. Let's see. We can spend down. It's just 28, 300.
We play the Bills, 2,600. We're playing Singletary.
Yeah,
I mean, Bills are a good defense. I don't mind that.
We could do AJ Dillon. Oh, we could do Giovanni Bernard. We could do AJ Dillon. We could do Sonny Michel or Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
I think Dillon then.
Yeah, Dillon just a touchdown upside.
Yeah.
All right, let's go with Dillon.
Bills, and Julio Jones.
And then we need to switch our defense up.
I'm not afraid of playing defense against Patrick Mahomes this year. I mean, he throws plenty of interceptions.
That's true. So, yeah.
And their team's really good at deflecting his perfectly thrown balls for interceptions also.
That's very true. And they're the top-ranked defense up against the pass.
Let's rock this lineup. I like this.
I like it.
I'm down. Let's
got
do
a little running back defense correlation there too.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm down for it. I'm all here for correlation, but yeah, in different cases. All right. That's going to wind it up for us, or wind it down for us, or complete it for us. It was a very well thought out show. Something that we did not see coming 10 minutes before the episode started. But we sorted through it. We found some good stacks, some good correlations. Of course, I do want to give a shout out to Marquise Valdes-Scantling as a option who's running routes on pretty much every single play up against a defense that has struggled significantly to stop deep routes, or I'm sorry, deep threat receivers, excuse me. Tyler Johnson, who is on the hate list for Tom Brady, but still saw targets after he initially got chewed out on the field, worse than a girlfriend in the bar that is, dating a guy who's hitting on another chick. And then we also have Giovanni Bernard, who we didn't talk a lot about, up at 5K. I think it's all interesting. I wouldn't go too cheap in these matchups. I think that, getting players that are on the field are crucial for this, outside of Anthony Ferguson, who still sees targets inside the red zone. So, real quick, Aaron, can you let everybody know where to find you?
Yeah. So I write for the Fantasy Footballers. It's a little bit of a downtime now as we get ready for the off season. I'm not doing a lot of DFS stuff over there, but the other guys are. My DFS stuff is all with Team Rise or Fall. So I write a couple articles per week with them. They're doing good things over there.
All right, Jacob, what you got, man?
Yeah, man, you can find me on Twitter, FF_RTDB. I'll have another edition of the Playoff Pareto Principles up for Player Profiler. That'll probably come out on Friday once we have a clearer picture of the ownership and where things are going to settle and where things are going to go with injuries. Always fun being on here. Hopefully we can replicate some of last week's good calls. And I've certainly have not burnt any money on Ryan Tannehill this year, so I know that this will only go well.
God. Oh, man. I've burnt so much money. It's been ridiculous. Yeah. At least in the first part of the season. Anyways, you guys can go check us out over there at fantasyintervention.com. You guys can go find the dump off containment efficiency score, where you can find running backs that succeed up against certain defenses, or I should say defenses that fail to contain running backs. It's been a tool that we've been using the entire year here and has found us finishing the top 5 running backs multiple different occasions. Once again, that's fantasyintervention.com/DOCE. That could have a new home very soon. We're going to find out here within the next couple months. I'm very excited about that. Meanwhile, we have, of course, Trophy Smack, who has been, wonderful thus far. The articles that we're putting out are just constant. I have another article coming out this week. We have Jeff coming in for rookie rankings, of course, and doing his analogies, which should be some fun articles coming out. Meanwhile, of course, you got to visit trophysmack.com, get a trophy, use promo code CIRCLE, you get a free ring along with either a belt or trophy. Of course, you have to purchase the trophy or belt. You get a free ring with it. And then, yeah, you guys can find all my articles over there at playerprofiler.com for DFS, and go check us out over there at youtube.com/fantasyintervention. I pretty much lost my voice throughout this episode. I've been trying to keep it up, but I can barely talk at this point. So, listen, I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Make sure you guys go hit subscribe over there at youtube.com/fantasyintervention. And thank you guys for letting us intervene with your fantasy football life. We're out.